If this video gets 300 likes, thanks. I appreciate you.
Tell me why ain't nothing but a party.
What's up, my Nimrods? It's Gage coming back at you guys again with another video today. I am 1 billion gajillion % thankful that you guys would spend a couple minutes with me today to talk about a children's card game that we both mutually enjoy so fucking much. I've done a few cards that I think should be moved around on the ban list recently, and I know it's kind of getting a little bit over-encompassing here, but I want to talk about one more that's been on my mind for a very long time, and it's one that actually saw some decent play recently, but it's a card that I think easily can come back to 3, and that card is one of my favorites of all time, Book of Moon. Released in Pharaonic Guardian back in 2003, this card is quite ancient. It's a simple effect, quick play that reads, target one face-up monster on the field, change that target into face-down defense position. We're talking about Book of Moon, and how I think it's easily a card that's been overlooked for a very long time that can come back to 3. Quite possibly, like I said, one of my favorite cards in Yu-Gi-Oh! It's so simple, but even the artwork and just the amount of power this card holds is pretty interesting. Book of Moon for the longest time was considered a staple in the game. When it was first released in Pharaonic Guardian, everybody was playing 3 of this card. Card was absolutely insane back in the day. This is more back at the time when the game was a lot fucking slower. But if I think we take Book of Moon and we compare it from way back then to today's standards, Book of Moon just doesn't seem like that fantastic of a card anymore. Certainly has been power crept out of the game to a huge extent. Holy shit. Book of Moon's most recent play was at 1, which it still is at currently, but actually it did see play in Zodiac format as a way to interrupt your opponent from doing their things with Zodiacs, because you would just simply Book of Moon the Rat Peer or whatever they would normal summon, and then from there they're not able to XYZ summon. But I think as we move forward to even Link era, Book of Moon lost a lot more of its playability. I believe Book of Moon is a card that already should have been back at 3 ever since the cards that really got it put to 1 in the first place got banned. And those cards, for people unfamiliar, are the jars, being Morphing Jar 2. This created a deck that was absolutely not fun to play with, and that deck was Empty Jar. Empty Jar was a deck that revolved around abusing Morphing Jar and Morphing Jar 2 to flip them face down, face up over and over again to then mill your opponent's deck out rather easily. There was an FTK with it and everything. Deck was extremely degenerate, and I believe that's what kept Book of Moon at 1 for the longest time. You would have to utilize other cards such as Book of Eclipse, which actually ended up being okay in that deck anyways because it allowed your opponent to draw even more cards out of their deck. Book of Taiyu was another card you would use, and A&D Changer to change the position of your monsters as much as you could. However, without dispute, if Book of Moon was at 3, Book of Moon would be played at 3 in that deck, because flipping down is a lot harder than flipping face up. But even just outside of Empty Jar, Book of Moon has been a card that a lot of players have gone to, and a lot of players are very, I think, fond of, more than they actually hate it. Back in the day, if you would Book of Moon one of your opponent's monsters at the correct time, it could be devastating for any combos that they would push through, or it could actually effectively end their turn. For example, if we're going back to a format like, say, for instance, +1 Fire Fist format, Book of Moon, I still believe, was at 1 at the time there. It's been at 1 for the longest time, but for example, if my opponent activated a Tenki to search out Bear, and then normal summon a Bear with the intent of popping my monsters, I could simply snap Book of Moon, flip their monster face down, and since really back in that format, a normal summon Bear was insane anyways, that would actually effectively end their turn. Besides maybe from Mermails, you weren't really seeing some crazy shit happening on the Fire Fist end. Like I said last video, I believe, a card like Card Cardi was insane back in that day. Book of Moon and Card Cardi was pretty good too. And again, the flipping their normal summon face down or just interrupting their normal summon with Book of Moon was huge. So since there wasn't that much crazy shit happening, the single card that could stop one monster your opponent summoned was huge. It would stop your opponent's pretty much entire turn at that point. But I think as we move farther on into the game here, this card loses a lot of power, and it loses, I think, a huge majority of its power with the new Master Rule kicking in and the rulings behind Link monsters. Unless you've been living under a rock, you are probably well aware you cannot flip a Link monster face down, which means you cannot use Book of Moon in any capacity. Not all decks play Link monsters, I totally understand that, But the fact that also if you were to Book of Moon just even a regular normal summon, that's so easy to make even multiple plays without that normal summon being face up. It's not critical by any means. Book of Moon is a card that I believe with its long time in the game has lost a lot of its potency that people are afraid of since back in the day. Like I said, we're not back in the days of vanilla Yu-Gi-Oh! Where you have one normal summon and maybe one special summon if you're lucky in the turn, and then your turn's kind of just ending there. Book of Moon would be huge back then. Book of Moon again was huge in Fire Fist format for the fact that normal summons was just it. And it was good in Zodiac because it relied on the one normal summon. But now, today's standards, the game is just so many different things at a time that it just doesn't really matter that you would Book of Moon one monster. And rather than just looking at Book of Moon as a useless card in today's standards, I actually think it would be quite the opposite. It would be a very useful tool to work around Floodgate monsters, and a very reliable one at that. I want to go back to Zodiac format again because I believe that's a really good format to determine the scope of this card and just how good it can be in today's standards. People back in Zodiac format, dropping a Zodiac Trident turn 1 was crazy. This card obviously was a huge cornerstone in that meta. You had to find a way to deal around Tridents to actually play the game. And while Book of Moon was at 1, people would opt to play that, of course, but also they would opt to play a card like Forbidden Chalice to negate the effect of Zodiac Trident so they can make their turns safely. If Book of Moon was at 3 in that format, I think people would be playing 3 of Book of Moon. Hands down, the card would be absolutely bonkers in that. Being able to flip off Rapiers as soon as your opponent shotguns, normal summons it, expecting to go off on their plays, stopping them with a Book of Moon would be massive. There were other cards that were just as bonkers in that format. For example, Dimensional Barrier, which isn't that great in today's standards. Super surprising because this card was disgusting back when we didn't have links. Dimensional Barrier was a single way to kind of just stop your opponent's entire turn, but I do think if we compare it, Book of Moon at 3 I think would be healthier than having Dimensional Barrier at all in that format. I despise the entire design of Dimensional Barrier. It's just not a well-designed card at all. Completely stopping your opponent's turn dead in its tracks for no cost is ridiculous. Book of Moon does that, but to a very shorter scope. For example, if my opponent were to flip up a Dimensional Barrier against me and I'm playing Zodiac, they call XYZ, I'm shut out of my entire turn. Whereas if I'm playing Zodiac and I normal summon a Rapier and I get met with a Book of Moon, I can still activate a card like Zodiac Barrage and go off on my turn as I needed to. Saying this, Dimensional Barrier and Book of Moon are totally different cards, though. One is an all-encompassing aura effect that'll affect the entire board. One is just a single target spell. And I do believe the ones that target a single spell really promote the player to be more knowledgeable of the game and what to target. If you knew you were playing against Zodiac, you could actually just sometimes even just brainlessly flip up Dimensional Barrier, and that would lead to a handshake from there just because of how absurd the card is. But if Book of Moon is played, you have to, of course, be weary of my opponent can have a Zodiac Barrage and continue their plays. How do I play around that appropriately? Hopefully that kind of puts Book of Moon in an area where you can understand how good it is. But I do definitely think, since we are in an Link era as well, this card should come back to 3. I also think Book of Moon would be a really cool card to have in Link format because zoning now matters. If you can determine which zone is important for your opponent to have open, if they recklessly summon a monster in that zone, you can punish them by flipping that monster face down. And you're not allowed to use face down monsters to summon a Link monster. That would be a really massive and really cool interaction with this card in the Link format. It totally makes up for the fact that you can't flip down a Link monster. That would be absolutely insane, and I'd say this card couldn't come back because when you sink 4 materials into one Firewall Dragon only for it to get flipped and then say, oh, whoops, sorry, shouldn't have done that, that'd be pretty bonkers. But since that's not an interaction, I believe Book of Moon, his power is in great check from that. I definitely think Book of Moon is a very skillful card to learn how to play with. We're not quite back in the days of where a single Book of Moon would halt an entire turn. We're past even the Zodiac phase, which would probably be the most closest thing we have to that. But even if we're looking at today's standards with flip monsters, they just aren't a fucking thing. All the morphing jars are banned, which is really what would, I think, provide a bad stigma with this card, a bad kind of aura in people's minds. Like, this card could never come back as long as the morphing jars are legal. But it just so happens that both of the morphing jars are banned. So what exactly are we scared about with Book of Moon coming back to 3? I'd love to hear what you guys think, because I honestly couldn't tell you.
That's all, folks.
If you guys liked the video, be sure to like the video, thumbs up the video, how to express that you enjoyed the video. I truly do thank you guys for spending a couple minutes to watch the video with me today. Well, I'm not watching the video, but I'm glad you watched the video. If you guys did enjoy the video, be sure to hit that subscribe button. Heard it makes you 10% cooler when you do hit that subscribe button and subscribe to your boy Nim Nim. I'm posting regularly, and I'm having a grand old time posting content for you guys. So if you want to stay up to date on that, that subscribe button's the best way to do it. And also, don't forget to hit that bell button so you get notified when I upload my subpar Yu-Gi-Oh content. But that being said, I will catch you guys most likely Monday with another video. I'm going to start queuing up videos so when I go out for break, I can be prepared and have a whole bunch of content ready for you guys. That being said, be sure to like, comment, and definitely subscribe, and I will catch you guys next time. Nim Nim signing out.